So thank you everybody and welcome. Thank you for coming here and for supporting this event. Of course, a lot of thank you to the ladies who are here to talk with us. The idea is to highlight different paths of careers that can come out of mathematical education that our department provides, and to have a place for a conversation that goes beyond academic conversation about life afterwards. We're going to have 4 speakers today: Yuejia Peng, Catherine Katz, Jenny Wang, and Yuejia. Each one of them will give a presentation, and afterwards we will have time to have a conversation with them. First is Yuejia Peng. Thank you again for coming here. So, the founder. Yeah, please. I'll just say just one sentence. Founder and director of Hub 101 Earth, online e-learning on a wide range of climate, nature, and environment. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay with this? Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I had some slides. I don't know whether I click through them or... There. It's hard being the first. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it's always so wonderful to be back at the LSE. I was here many years ago. I don't want to divulge how long because you'll judge me for it. But yeah, I mean, I have such fond memories of this place. It's always great to find any excuse to come back. And certainly when Professor Werner asked me to join this panel, I half thought, oh goodness, what have I got to say about maths and these days? Because at the moment, I'm actually not doing that much to do with maths, but I thought I could share my journey in terms of how I got to the LSE and what I've done since then. Let's see if this works. So I was born in China and I grew up in Zimbabwe. And being a non-English native speaker when I was young, maths was one of the only places where I showed I had some intelligence. And so I held on to that with a very strong hold, and I got to enjoy it very much over the years. And it was one of my A-levels. And in fact, I should say that these slides and this presentation is probably going to be the least academic that you ever see in your life. So yeah, bear with me, lots of pictures. Not a formula in sight, unfortunately, Professor. So I grew up in Zim, and then there was a lot of question about what I do with my life, because I was somebody who's interested in lots of different things. So by the time I went off to the US to a liberal arts college for my first year, I had narrowed things down somewhat to economics by that point, because I was just really interested in how people related to each other and how we created our societies and how those are run, who gets to make the decisions that affect all of us, right? But then by the time I finished my first year in the US, yeah, I had honed in on economics, and actually very belatedly, I threw an application through the UCA system and saw that there was an interesting degree called Maths and Economics from the LSE. And I thought, oh, maths I can do, economics is what I've chosen, so great. So off I went, and I arrived at the LSE. Yes, I will divulge, in 1998. So I was the class that graduated in 2001, making me very old. But I so enjoyed the degree. It was the only undergrad at that time, degree at that time. We were talking about how many degrees are offered under the maths department. And we felt very special, right? We were these, mathy people walking in the field of all these econ and all these development people, and we loved our unique identity, and all the professors, and some of really, really wonderful people are still around today. So if you're doing a degree right now with the maths department, I'd say, you know, you're very lucky. And there was a little bit of partying, not too much, but you know, I was part of Passfield Hall, and we enjoyed a lot of social activities as well. Then after the LSE, I wasn't really quite ready for the world of work yet, much to the dismay of my parents. I went off to Cambridge to do an MPhil in economics, and of course, this is where the degree of maths and econ really started opening doors for me, because everything I applied to, at least in that year, I got into. And I'd say the Cambridge experience was intense. It was quite different from the LSE undergrad. It became very theoretical, and I didn't enjoy it as much, let's just say. But out of that year, what came out was I got really interested in two sub-branches of economics, so feminist economics and development economics. And still I wasn't quite ready to join the world of work yet. So, and I looked around, and again, interestingly, at the LSE, there was a gender and development master's, and LSE being a very wonderful university offering all sorts of degrees, I thought, what an interesting combination, and it's just right for me. So I jumped back to the LSE, but this time under the Gender Institute, so totally different department. Made lots of, you know, wonderful friends, and learned a thing or two about gender dynamics, which is certainly something that's always lurking in the background. And I know this talk is about, you know, women in maths, and that's something that I'll come back to as my experience grew as a woman also entering the workplace. So when I left the LSE for the second time, I thought, okay, my parents, by this time they were desperate, okay? They were like, please, can you just stop studying, go get a job that pays, so that you can, you know, kind of take care of yourself. I thought, okay, fine. So I looked around, and I don't know how many of you have had negative experiences looking for work, if you can put your hands up. It's proven difficult at one point or another. No shaming, you know, this is all fine. Yeah, so I looked around for a job when I left my second master's, and it was a really difficult time. You know, it was just after, 2 years after 9/11, the economy was not good. I must have sent out something like 80 cover letters and CVs to all sorts of organizations, but the ones I was interested in more in was in consulting. Again, I was quite a generalist. I was curious about lots of different things. And so, but in hindsight, I was one of those really lazy and immature students that just copy and pasted every application. And that did not go down well, clearly, and also given the tough environment. So I had a couple of offers, but some of it fell through. But I ended up at, my first job ended up at Goldman. There was a last-minute position that came up, and I thought, you know, never really thought about finance, but why not? You know, I think quite a few of the LSE alumni head that way. Understanding our financial system is always a good thing. So off I went to Goldman, and needless to say, I did not have a good time. And maybe some of you would enjoy that environment more than I did. But, you know, I found it very, at that time was 20 years ago, right? This is now where we are in a different environment. It was very male-dominated. It was quite aggressive, especially on the trading floor. So after 10 months, I mean, but I say that, you know, my confidence about maths and econ, which came through all my studies and especially through the LSE, was my backbone, and that kind of kept me afloat. So I was very capable in my job. I learned loads as a junior analyst, but I did not enjoy the dynamics one bit, especially coming out of a gender degree straight onto the trading floor. So I said, nope, that's it. I'm going to do something different. And by this time, the economy was recovering. There's a lot of zigzagging throughout the 2000s in terms of the job market. So by this time, about 10 months later, an offer from a consulting company came through, which was called Strategic Decisions Group. It was a small boutique consulting firm that did strategic analyses. So they were spun out of the Stanford University Business School. So what they did was, their bread and butter is, this is where the math comes in again, they would have clients who need to make very big upfront capital investment decisions. So, pharmaceutical companies, energy companies, infrastructure companies. So those who have to decide there and then whether to spend tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for something that would pay off in, I don't know, 5, 10, 20 years' time. So how do you make those decisions in the face of long-term payoff and uncertainty, right? So off I went, joined SDG, and I had a great time, lots of training, but I built many Excel models. To this day, Excel is, like my best friend. But yeah, and also the other side of consulting is clearly you get to travel a lot. So I went to all sorts of places, different countries, different clients, had a whale of a time. But I think over the period of this very active traveling and consulting phase, it just started to occur to me the state of our planet. I've always loved astronomy. So interestingly, when you look out to the stars, you actually start to appreciate a bit more what we have at home, because we only have one planet, and it just happens to have the amazing conditions that allowed us to actually evolve and exist. I think we take that for granted, that we're just here and we're all in this room and we're all breathing. We have air, we have water. And so that's when I started thinking more about what can we do for our planet, because we've not done a very good job in looking after it. So I started exploring ways of doing more work for our planet in bits and pieces. So I tried to start a consulting service that focuses specifically on environmental issues. And by this time, SDG has been bought up by IHS Markit, which is a much bigger financial services and consulting and information company. So yeah, so I floated this idea around 2010. Again, nobody was interested, because what the official line is always, well, nobody's going to pay for that because none of our clients are asking for it. So why would we do that? So, and bear in mind, this was like 15 years ago. People weren't ready for that conversation then. Now it's a totally different ballgame, right? You have many companies, many advisories working in this space, which is a good thing. And, well, that looks a little different from when I prepared it. But anyway, so around the same time, and this is where the woman bit came in, right? I had a personal life. I had my boyfriend for a long time. I wanted to get married and have kids. And that proved quite difficult, trying to match that with a very intense traveling, 24/7 consulting kind of work. So I actually made the decision to park that for a while, and I switched to research, where I can more easily control my own agenda, my timelines. I also went part-time. Now, we can spend a bit more time later maybe talking about the pros and cons of flexible and part-time working, because there are definitely good and bad piece about it. And again, I was doing this quite many years ago, and perhaps the options are looking better now for the ladies in this room. But yeah, I had to make some start choices then. But what I did try to do by this point, IHS Markit, is I took the carbon piece from many of our energy systems. So we had a very popular product with our clients called Energy and Climate Scenarios. So, the outlook for our energy systems, as in how much fossil fuels or how much renewables are we going to use, and project that all the way into the future, but based on 3 types of scenarios. One is if the world went to just disintegrated and nothing worked. One is sort of like in between. The other one is the world can get together, we can work on green solutions and climate change and all that. And you can imagine, right? We're seeing bits of all of that right now, even today. So I took that piece of work and I started to model what would the climate and carbon market piece look like. So that was the first, I think, carbon pricing prediction, history and prediction piece at IHS Markit, and actually out of many of the financial services institutions. And so that's actually where the maths came back in again. Because certainly my ability to model and outward look towards the future, what might happen, what are the different levers, that all helped. And started thinking about what are these different models that would work. Essentially, the economist in me just thought, okay, many of our financial and economic systems are actually responsible for the mess that we're in right now because they're investing in the wrong things. We're not costing things properly, things like pollution, environmental degradation, deforestation. Many of these things that we don't want to see around the world is still happening because of financial and economic decisions. And so one of my focus area became, how do we change those economic incentives so that we can have them work in favor of what we want to see more, work in favor of protecting forests or stop deforestation or implementing that renewable project, etc. So that became my thing. And then over time, that also expanded into looking at solutions that involve nature. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room likes nature. It would be very difficult to find somebody who doesn't. It would be quite strange. But we take it for granted that, many of us take it for granted that it would just be there and it's not going to get degraded, but that's just not the case. So this is about 20 years. It's a busy slide. But by the end of 20 years, I sort of thought, okay, I feel like I need to do something different because I got frustrated around who am I serving, right? So I was serving many clients, fee-paying clients, who can afford, say, to have training on what are carbon markets, how do they work, what is the latest pricing for the EU ETS, and etc. But then there are lots of people in the world who don't have that information and they should be involved. So about 2 years ago, I left and founded Hub101.Earth, which is a open access platform for environmental education and training and basic information around what are the solutions that's out there. So just in terms of the problems that I saw and what I'm trying to address. So, I mean, who here thinks that the news these days is just very negative? We're just hearing more about problems than solutions, right? Okay, I'm quite depressed if I just read the news all the time. I think there might be 1 or 2 positive articles if you read through the entire BBC website. So I think we need to talk more about solutions because there are loads that we can do. You and I, people from around the world, people sitting in central banks, people who own a piece of land in Africa. Everybody has the opportunity to do something that will turn things around. So my idea is around spreading the word about solutions and what about access to quality information and experts? Now this is something that a lot of companies and advisories make their money on, right? They sort of say, oh, we have the experts, and so if you want to talk to us, we'll charge you $1,000 an hour. And that was something that I wanted to just make more available to everybody who might need it. And also learning should be more accessible. We are sitting here at the LSE, and that's a very prestigious institution, but that's not accessible for lots of people. I know everybody worked very hard to be here, but there are lots of people, for whatever reason, don't have access. And that became part of my rallying call as well, is that how do we improve access to various people, and especially, say, younger people, and also those based in the Global South. And because there are many of these solutions, the first piece, that will sit in the Global South. And they are, many of them are ready to go, but there are still many dots that needs to be connected. And so, today I'm trying to do something different. So Hub has lots of different learning series on various environmental topics, right? So you can imagine they're all interlinked. Water is linked to climate, and climate is linked to carbon, carbon is linked to nature, etc. So we try to cover these topics, and this is all open access and freely available. We're trying to maintain an online open access platform. We also launched a YouTube channel, which, like words I never thought I'd say, is subscribe to our new YouTube channel. We run workshops for Global South audiences like schools, policymakers, communities who are on the ground trying to make a difference. And yeah, I've had a whale of a time since I left. Certainly, it's less predictable, right, than your average corporate job, which I did for 20 years. But it's just so exciting. And, you know, there's this couple of pictures of me at COP a month ago, meeting our partners. So these are some of our partners that we work with in Liberia, West Africa, Brazil, etc. So it's been a very interesting journey. And lastly, I think just, you know, maybe we can do this during the panel discussion. But lastly, I just want to say a couple of things that I learned. I wish I could tell my younger self if I were to come back and sit in that seat and listen to a seminar. I think maths and econ definitely open doors. Whether you're doing maths or econ, and maths with econ now, there are all these different degrees available, which is wonderful. It definitely opens doors. It allows you to be part of the conversation, but then you have to take it to the next step. You know, you have to figure out what you want out of those next step conversations. And as a woman, I think in particular, or as a young person, this is Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And so, you know, there has been many cases where I sat in a room and I felt inferior for whatever reason. So just try not to let that take over, because you have lots to offer. I think as a society, we need a broader definition of success. You know, we are very much focused on the career path, yeah, when you think about somebody who's successful at their work, it's actually fairly a narrow range. So let's broaden that a bit more. And I think this is something true to women, is that we aim for perfection. We really try to do things 100, 120%, and that just becomes very tiring and almost impossible. And, you know, I think you really should try to balance things. Don't do everything at the same time. Important to invest in yourself too, and those around you, your relationships, and take some risks, right? We don't really take enough risks, and have some fun. You know, be joyful. And that's it. Thank you.
Questions? Our next speaker is Yasmin. She's a PhD student in environmental mathematics.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. Yeah, I'm Jasmine. I'm a third-year PhD student here at LSE. I work mostly in graph theory, but I didn't go straight into research after my undergraduate. I actually worked for a little bit at a bank, so I can talk a little bit about my experience and how I ended up doing a PhD here at LSE. So right at the very beginning in school, I definitely wasn't a maths genius. I always got decent grades, but I definitely wasn't remarkable, and I didn't really see it as something that I would ever do a PhD in. I think maths in school is much more about sort of learning techniques and applying them in a bit more routine ways, which I didn't find as interesting as the type of maths I did in university. So at the end of school, I did a broad range of subjects. I did English, psychology, physics, and chemistry. And I really liked physics and English, so I had trouble deciding what to go into. But I thought the sciences might lead to a better job, and it might just be easier to get better grades in because they were less subjective than some of the humanities subjects. So I decided to do a science degree. So in my first year, I did biology, chemistry, physics, and maths. And actually, this is when I realized that maths was something I really enjoyed. The sort of maths I was doing at university was much more interesting than what I had done at school. I still really enjoyed physics, but eventually I realized that maths was what I wanted to do, and I stopped taking physics courses. At this point, though, I still didn't realize that I wanted to go into research. I still saw it as something I would do to get a job. I was in an integrated master's course. In Australia, it's called an honours degree, but I think here it's an integrated master's. So I did start an honours year or a master's year where I had to do a thesis, and I chose to do that in financial maths because I wasn't really sure about the other areas of maths. I didn't really enjoy the financial maths, so I decided I would just apply for industry jobs. And I took the first job that I was offered, which was a graduate trainee program at a bank in Australia called Westpac. It's one of the big commercial banks, so I guess a bit like NatWest is here. I really enjoyed my time working at that bank. I worked in Sydney for about 3.5 years. The work itself was interesting. I learned a lot more applied techniques. So I hadn't really done any coding or Excel in university. I'd always sort of avoided subjects which had too much coding because I hadn't done it before and I was intimidated by it. But I got to learn how to use Python and Excel in that job. Some of the work wasn't that interesting, so in the trainee program I did rotations in 3 different teams. I worked in 2 data analytics teams, and the work in those teams was a bit more just pulling data and compiling it and sort of presenting it back to stakeholders. So I didn't feel like I was really using anything from university, but I also did a rotation in the data science team, and that work was a lot more fun. That was where I learned to use Python, and I really enjoyed that team, and I thought the environment there was very supportive, and there was a bit of freedom to do whatever you were interested in as well. So I decided to go into the data science team. Even though there was some freedom to do more research-like work, we had a few ad hoc sort of projects which were driven by us. A lot of the work was still quite driven by the stakeholders and perhaps more closer to just more data analytics. So some of the work I really enjoyed, some of it wasn't as interesting. So I decided maybe I would go back to university. I hadn't done that many maths courses in my undergraduate, so I thought it would be good to go back and do some more different types of maths. And also, a lot of people in the area that I was working in did have master's degrees, and sometimes it's a requirement for some jobs, so it made a lot of sense to do that. It was also good timing because this was when COVID happened, so everyone started working from home. The master's degree was mostly online, so it was very easy to sort of balance working and doing a master's degree. I also really enjoyed having something to do during COVID outside of work, so I really enjoyed the degree, and during this time I took a course in combinatorics and a course in graph theory, and I really enjoyed both of those areas and decided to do my master's thesis in combinatorics. And this was sort of the first time that I thought about maybe I would actually go into research and continue studying maths rather than just doing it as something to supplement my working life, because I found sort of the work that the techniques that I used in combinatorics more interesting, and I thought maybe that would be a possibility. So after my master's, I moved to the UK, and then I applied for PhD programs while working here. I ended up getting a place at LSE, which I'm very glad about. The transition back to full-time study from working was harder than I thought it would be. I think especially because I had done my master's while working, I thought just studying full-time would be easier than having to balance both of those things. But obviously the work in the PhD is different from either a master's or from working. It's much more self-directed. I had to sort of relearn how to manage my own time and motivation. There's less sort of, with a job, you have more check-ins. It's very clear what your deliverables are and when your deadlines are, whereas with a PhD, the research can sort of go in a lot of different directions, so I had to sort of adjust to that style of working again. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the PhD though, so I'm glad that I made the decision to come back to academia. As for what comes after the PhD, I'm still not sure. I think I would like to stay in academia because I find the work interesting, and there are a lot of positives. So now that I'm used to the more flexible working hours, I really enjoy the flexibility, and I don't miss having 10 a.m. meetings almost every day. I like the opportunities for travel, which was not something I really had in my working life. But having said that, I think academia is also very competitive, and I think a lot of excellent PhD students don't end up staying in academia, so I'm keeping an open mind about what I do afterwards. So that's pretty much my whole journey to now. In terms of gender balances, when I was in undergraduate, I felt like, even though there were much fewer women than men in the courses I was taking, I felt like the women were always very friendly, and the men were also friendly, and the lecturers were all very supportive, so I felt like I had a nice community. I also felt very supported at work. Again, there weren't that many women in the data science team, but my boss was very supportive, and I didn't feel like it was a big thing. Okay, thank you for listening. That's all I have to say. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
The Royal London accent.
Hello. I don't know if this is working. It's probably not any different if I have that or not. That's fine. Can you hear me without it? Yeah. Okay, let's not use that then. Right. I probably have the least kind of experience out of anyone here, so thank you for inviting me. I actually only graduated from here 2 years ago, so very recently indeed. This all seems still very familiar to me. I maybe had a bit of an unusual uni experience, maybe not your typical experience. That mainly is because I had my daughter when I was 17, so I was always balancing kind of everything with being studying and also being a mum full-time and everything else that comes with it. With that kind of piece of important context about me aside, we can kind of go into how I got there. So it wasn't the normal route. So I found out I was pregnant when I was 17, and so just after starting my A-levels, and I very quickly changed my A-levels from more creative things to kind of more mathematics-based things, primarily because I realised I was going to have a child to feed, so let's make some money. So I went from doing the more creative things like music and French and politics to kind of economics and maths with my A-levels. And I originally didn't start uni here. I started uni at Queen Mary's in London. I did 1 year there, mainly because I have a very vivid memory in sixth form when I was applying to uni. My head of sixth form came and he had a substitute class of our formal morning. We were doing our UCAS applications, and I said to him, there's this course at LSE, I think that would be a really cool one to apply to. And he looked at me and he went, do you want to do something a bit more realistic than that? So I didn't apply to LSE first of all, went to Queen Mary for a year, had really good grades, and kind of thought, you know what, I'm going to try it, I'm going to give it a go, what's the worst that can happen? And then we go, I got in, that was great. Since being here, first year you don't have a whole lot of choice in your modules. Things went quite well. It was all on COVID. It was all during kind of COVID, so all online based. I kind of followed the trend of everyone else and decided to apply for kind of spring weeks and summer internships. And so for my summer internship, I was beyond lucky. I got given a really cool role. I did quant research at BlackRock in the fixed income department. Before doing that, I had no coding experience really, other than a bit of MA214, but that was my first experience of coding at all. So it was really being thrown in the deep end, and I'm so thankful that I got given that opportunity. Coming back from that, I was like, wow, I really like this kind of data and statisticsy kind of stuff. So that really helped influence what I took in third year. I decided to take more kind of applicable modules and data-focused modules, because that's when I kind of decided what I wanted to do. I really like the coding side and the data side of things. So after graduating, I briefly worked at a company called TradeWeb. If no one knows what that is an electronic trading platform. So it is the kind of software and the venue that is used to bring together like the sell side, so your Goldman Sachs and things like that, where they kind of make markets, and then the buy side, where we invest money long term. The trades take place on this website, sometimes called TradeWeb, and I worked on their automated trading team, so we got to do some really cool kind of data science projects, kind of dealer selection tools and price prediction models. So that was a really cool opportunity, and was definitely a good place to kind of use my new kind of passion of data science and coding based skills. I didn't really stay there too long though. I kind of, having had that experience working at BlackRock, I had my mindset on kind of going back to the buy side. So after about a year, I decided to leave there, and I joined Royal London Asset Management, which is where I am still today. So just a little bit about where I work now. Royal London is our parent company. They are a pension and insurance company. And then Royal London Asset Management, we are the asset management arm of that. So we are an external asset manager as well. So people on the street, you can go onto that money box, whatever you have your ISAs with, and invest in our funds. But primarily our client base is going to be our group pensions. So we will take regular people's money that they put in their pensions, and we will try our best to make it into more money. I specifically work on our trading and execution analytics team. So essentially I am the execution analytics part of that. The rest of my team are all traders who go out and try and get the best price for all of the purchases and sales that they do. So my role as quantitative analyst is quite a broad one. It's not really so much of a... It's a very hard role to describe. Because if you're in the world of finance and you know the terms of, specifically in asset management, I guess, you might know the terms of pre-trade, post-trade analytics and how kind of separate those are. If you go to a much bigger place, you might have people who just work on the post-trade, just work on the pre-trade. Essentially, anything that is vaguely technical is going to kind of be thrown my way. So that can range anything from the data engineering side to the data analytics side to the data science side. Anything kind of roughly to do with numbers kind of gets shoved my way. That can mean I do some really exciting stuff. So it's really cool to be able to, you know, create from foundation to end, you know, from kind of creating the data pipelines, managing the views, kind of creating all of that from the ground up is really cool, and then we can take all the insights on it. I think the more fun stuff is definitely the pre-trade stuff, because we can create tools that kind of help our portfolio managers and our traders suggest trade ideas, which is really fun being at an active place. And there's definitely some more tedious things as well, but that's kind of all part and parcel of it. I think for me, whilst I think maths was essential for me to get my job. Do I use a whole lot of active maths in my day-to-day job? Probably not. But I think what some of the other people have spoken about is it's that mathematical mindset that really helps in every day. You kind of frame every problem you have as a mathematical problem, and that's how you end up working through solutions to it. And I would say that, yeah, while I'm not actively doing a whole lot of maths, it's those skills that I learnt during my degree that make it possible for me to do my job. I don't know how I'm doing for time. I'm trying to
You're doing well.
Yeah. So that kind of sums up everything what I was going to say. Yeah, I'll leave it there.